This is Death, Sex, and Money. I'm Anna Sale, and I am really glad to be here with you tonight in Los Angeles as part of this festival that's celebrating what women podcasters are making, the Work It Festival. It's really an honor to be here in this incredibly beautiful theater. I hope you got to see it before the lights went down. Our show is about the things we think about a lot and need to talk about more. And tonight, we're talking about a life phase where there's a lot to think about and a lot to talk about. Our 20s. When I think about my 20s, what I remember is feeling like I had this clear track in front of me that immediately came to an abrupt end when school ended. And everything that had felt somewhat familiar fell away. And I had to learn how to support myself. I had to think about whether I needed more schooling to keep supporting myself into my career. But really one of the things I thought the most about was sex, and whether I knew how to do it, and whether I was doing it enough, and whether people wanted to have sex with me, and then finally realizing I got to think about whether I wanted to have sex with them. But there's a lot that goes into that phase of life, and we asked Death, Sex, and Money listeners over the last couple of months if they were in their 20s, what questions they had in their lives as they were beginning adulthood. And y'all had a lot of questions. So we're gonna do some life advice at the end of this show with my incredible guests who are here tonight. I am so stoked with these women that are here. Terri Coleman is here. We first met her in our New Orleans series. She was on the show, and she flew all the way from New Orleans, Louisiana to be here tonight to tell a story on stage, guys. Also here is Niecy Nash. Okay, Niecy. Love Niecy. I love her in Reno 911. I loved her in Getting On. I love her in Claws. But we're gonna talk about the phase in her life when she was beginning her acting career in her 20s, and also having 3 kids. Niecy got it done in her 20s. But my first guest was already famous by the time she hit 20. Now you see her on Search Party, on TBS. You've seen her in the latest season of Transparent. But when she was 14, she got cast as Maybe on Arrested Development. Please welcome Alia Shawkat.
Hi. That's my radio voice. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
So my first question for you is whether...
I'm just
Get comfy.
figuring out my physicality.
Get comfy.
Yeah.
Did starting working as a kid make you feel like you were going through what you noticed your peers go through in your 20s at an earlier stage or a later stage?
Did it make me notice what they were going through?
Or did you feel like you were going through the things that come with your 20s when you were 15, 16?
I definitely feel like I had a little bit of a early view on some things. Watching, the way certain adults act under pressure or just when they're uncomfortable. Being a kid, with Michael Cera, going to Fox parties, drinking cranberry juice, and strange people coming up to us, and we were really invisible at those parties. Nobody was watching the show, so we just got into these weird parties, and we're hanging out at Hollywood parties that now I've lost interest in, even though I still go. But but yeah, I definitely had a different view. I mean, also being a young professional, I guess you could call it, people are speaking to you with, you have a lot of responsibility, but you're still a kid. So it's a strange thing because you kind of have to play the kid and also do your job. And your parents are all of a sudden not in a powerful role. They're and if anything, they have the least powerful role. They're right, you're the set mom. Can you go away? Huh. And it's kind of weird, but I always gave respect to my parents. I was like, no, you sit in this chair. But then there'd be other kid actors I'd see, and they'd be like, get the hell out of my chair, mom. It's, so it was a strange, kind of dichotomy for being a kid, but feeling like I had more power than I had access to at the time, if that makes sense.
Hmm. And you didn't get some of the money that you were earning as a kid until you became 18, right?
Yeah.
So
didn't
when
get that
you
money.
Got this money that you'd been earning for years, did you know what to do with it?
No. No. Still don't. Yeah, it was strange. I came up in a family that always had, provided for me very well. They weren't extremely wealthy, but, we were, well-to-do. So I never, while I was shooting or working, I was always able to, have things. There was never really a struggle in that world. But then when I turned 18, I went to Sarah Lawrence College for literally 2 days. And it's a very expensive private school, wonderful school, so I've heard. I went there.
Did you pay for the 2 days?
And so it's a very expensive tuition, but which I found out after I got all the money back. I was like, that's how much I was spending on it? But it was my own money. But yeah, there was always, and what I realize now, looking back on a lot of things, is that it was my choice not to ask. Because I was 18 and always had what I wanted, but then all of a sudden I was really pulling from my actual account. And my dad was always like, you can't be spending your money like this. And he's foreign. So that's where that vague accent comes from. But yeah, I didn't know what to do. So I got to school, I wanted to be working at the same time and kind of thought I was like Natalie Portman with Star Wars on the back burner, but really I was an unknown actress who had an indie film in the back burner. And I was like, so, I have to go to Florida to shoot this low budget movie. And they were like, if you miss more than 2 classes, you're done. You can't, you have to commit to being in school. And so I kind of just had to decide right there, very quickly. I was like, I'm not going to be here then. I have to go do what I'm doing. And so my friend picked me up. I moved to the city. And then I was spending $600 on a fancy dress and then counting quarters to have Thai food at night. Huh. And I was like, I know, sad, right? I feel like there's much worse stories. But I was had a place in the West Village, a studio. I just didn't know what it meant, what to invest or where I wanted to put my money, what would actually be helpful and come back, or what I wanted to invest in just emotionally and actually financially. So it was a very strange time. And then I wasn't working. I kind of stopped working because I was feeling bitter about being some kind of ingenue. I didn't feel like I was, and all these things. So I wasn't working, so I wasn't making money, but I was spending it like crazy. And it really got to the point where it just, and my dad, looking back on it, was always like, let's go over your money, and I could tell you how to do it. And I was like, da, 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 da. I don't want to hear that, I was very scared of it. And it's taken a while, but to me, slowly, things have been good. I've been working now, but it's almost the more I took focus on creatively what I wanted to do, the more I was like, right, and then what does that mean? What do I actually get paid for? Instead of just following some instinct, I don't want to see it, blinders. I definitely had blinders on when I was young.
I want to talk a little bit more about talking about money with your dad and about your parents' business. Mm-hmm. So growing up, did you know what kind of business your parents were running?
Yes, and I was aware. Aren't you guys excited to find out what it was?
Let's do the big reveal. When was the first time that you went inside the business your folks were running?
So my parents own a gentleman's nightclub called Showgirls in Cathedral City. Go check it out. Drop my name. You'll get VIP. It's a great business. My parents ran it together. They opened it together. And, it was always treated, it was never secretive. My father was always home in time for dinner. Sometimes he'd get angry phone calls, at dinner time being like, you tell blah, 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 because it's like a nightclub. So there's a lot of fights and, intense conversations that were happening over at the nightclub while we were having dinner. But we had a very, my parents are very conservative yet open, but kind of buttoned up people. So there was never any kind of weird wash. It was very funny when people would talk about it, especially when I was young. As I got a little older, meaning 12, 13, and boys in school would be like, your parents own a strip club, can we get in? And I was like, yeah. I was like, no, you're underage, obviously. But it was a strange thing where I noticed how, because in my family, it never really affected us. Even though, in my dad's car, he would have these magazines, and it was, products to buy for the club. And they're, kind of sex magazines. Sex toys or things like that, or, bar stools, for nightclubs. And me and my brother, found it, and it wasn't you found Dad's porn. It was oh, just put that down. What are you doing? That's Dad's business stuff. We just, and leave it on the counter. It was nothing ever hush-hush or secretive. And my dad's office was like separate from the place, and it just always was like the family business. But then naturally over time, I only went in there once when I was like very young, like 10 or something. There was a fire, and so I got to go in, and I remember there being like a lizard.
There was a fire, so you
There
got
was a
to go
fire.
into the
Yeah, they were
strip
like, "Go
club.
now!" I was like, "It's still going, the fire." No, the fire stopped. Yeah, very like my dad was like very strict about rules. Like I didn't actually go in as a customer until I was 21. But when I remember in the fire, this part of the story is really important. Just that I found a lizard, and I remember the lizard's tail, like it kind of broke off because I was holding it, and I was like shocked. And then like someone who was working at the club was like, "Their tails grow back," and I was like, "Unbelievable." So I remember that. And then when I was 21, I went in with one of my best friends, Sebastian, who's.
Did you tell your parents you were coming?
Yeah. And my dad, like, he wasn't against it, but he was just like, I was like, why? And I was like, I don't know. It's paid for my private schooling and dinner ever since I was a child, and it's your, like, livelihood, our livelihood. Like, I'm curious. So he was, like, a little nervous, but wasn't, like, telling me not to go. It was just a little, like, okay. He, like, wanted to make sure to go with me. And I went with my friend, you know, who's a gay guy, both of our interests were a little off. But we went in, we ended up playing pool most of the time. And then I sat down with him, and he was talking to me about, like, you know, asking me about my schedule. I was like, yeah, I have to go to New York next week, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, right, so you leave on Friday. And then this girl came up, and she couldn't have been older than me. She must have been younger. And she, you know, was in a bikini, and she was asking my dad, you know, a question also about scheduling, but, like, about her own schedule, like when she's working and stuff. And my dad kind of in the same breath was like, so you go to New York on Friday? No, you work on Friday. So you blah, 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 make sure you be here. Okay. So when do you get back? You know, to me. And I was just like, something's happening. And I felt very strange about it. There wasn't like anything negative about it, but I was just like, it kind of all hit me at once, where I was just like, wow, this obviously has affected the way I view my sexuality all my life. And you know, me and my dad had troubles when I was in high school because of like, I smoked pot, and that was like heroin to him. So we had our own time, but then we, you know, became close. But there was always, you know, he's a Middle Eastern man, and he's an amazing father and runs a great business. But I mean, he's like very respectful to everyone. But it was always something that kind of stood in the middle of us, like, you know, sexuality as a woman. I'm the only daughter, and you know, he doesn't want me to. It's not something we could talk about openly. I never would tell him when I was dating someone, or if I had, like, I'm having a problem with somebody, you know, or the fact that I was, like, attracted to women as well as men. Like, these things were just, like, never talked about with him. And now that I've gotten older, I'm like, it almost seemed just like, it's easier not to talk about it. We have a nice time when we, you know, have a barbecue. We just enjoy things together. There's no need to really get into stuff. But now it's necessary for me to feel complete and, you know what I mean?
Honest.
And honest, yeah, exactly.
Well,
it took me a long time to say that word, huh? But yeah.
It's interesting to me that you grew up kind of with an awareness and of a strip club not being a big deal, because there's seeing you in the latest season of Transparent, for example. I think you are you play one of the most self-assured roles of a woman on camera around her sexuality that I've seen. Like, you are so cool and so hot and totally not awkward.
Right.
Does it feel like that in real life for you?
No. That's why I act so much. I was like, can anyone just write me a part where I'm in a healthy relationship? It would be so fun. And then we rap, and I don't actually have to do it, you know? I used to say that on Search Party, actually, because Dory in the first season is not in a great relationship with her boyfriend, Drew, but I was like, it's great. I got a boyfriend during the day, and then I still get to, like, spread out in my bed and, like, scratch my butthole at night without having a guy there. No, it's not like that in my real life, I guess, no.
And as far as, like, when I think of my 20s, figuring out my belonging was something, and I'm still thinking about a lot, but in particular, it felt very urgent in my 20s. And I'm curious, like, growing up with an Iraqi-American dad in Southern California, did you feel white growing up?
You know, it's so funny to be talking about this now, because, like, in a strange way, a lot of things that happen when you're younger, you don't really realize it until at least a handful of years have passed by, and you're like, oh, wow, that was strange. In school, I was, like, the most ethnic one. And so I was always, even when kids would try to like say mean things and stuff, they would say slangs, like terrible like Arab slangs and stuff. And so I always, in my hair, and like, I had freckles, but I was just like, I always was too ethnic. And even when I started acting, the first interaction I had with acting was my mom. We got headshots taken and sent them to LA, and no one responded for a long time or called me in for auditions. And my mom called and was like, so what's the deal? Just want to make sure you're receiving them. And they said she's too ethnic for any of the roles. We don't really have a placement for her. And then it took me going to LA to audition, and they're like, she can act. Or, I got a cattle call.
She's not that ethnic looking.
Yeah, exactly. I guess ethnic people can act. So that's what was my first thing. Like, my mom had to tell me, like, this is why you haven't been getting called on stuff. And I was like, I'm too ethnic. Okay. And I, grew up in Palm Springs in a very small town, very small private school. So it wasn't very, there wasn't a lot of different ethnicities around. But it is strange because then becoming an actor, especially when I was younger, it was a lot of like, maybe if you put in highlights, you could play Mel Gibson's son or daughter, you know what I mean? Now, I'm glad that opportunity was missed. But at the time, it was a lot of that. Like, it was like, well, she's got freckles. She could be, like, at least she's a little white. And like, it was always that. And then still naturally, I would still get cast as the ethnic best friend. We don't know what ethnicity she is, but she's ethnic, that's for sure. And it's so funny because I never related that to my own identity, and then it became kind of more a part of it as I was getting frustrated by being like, I don't want to just play these roles, and I don't want to, and then also on the other end by being like, but then I'm not ethnic enough. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily have like, it's not clear what group I like fit in. People are just like, you look weird, So it was like me kind of finding it, and then in that, it's luckily, I've found confidence in my own like unique kind of beauty, which is being celebrated more now, which is great. But yeah, it's still something I deal with where I'm just like, I'm not this enough and I'm not that enough. So I almost get more offended when people are like, you're white, right? When you straighten your hair and like cover up your freckles a little bit, you look white. And I'm like, I'll be anything you want me to be. You know what I mean? Like slap it on. But no, now I'm trying to definitely identify more with that, and also with Arab American and just like my dad's family and all that. I'm trying to connect it more into my work now.
So we're going to have you back again at the end of the show.
Yes.
But you are our only guest who is actually in her 20s.
Oh, there you go.
So I want to ask you, thinking about your life now and what are the sort of big questions that you're struggling with, like, what do you hope in 10 years you are not struggling with anymore?
Great question. I hope I'm not changing to make other people comfortable. I think there's something healthy about, we're all different around different people in our lives, like our family, our lovers, our friends, people at work, and I think that's good to have different sides of our personality, and there's something great about that. People bring out different qualities, but I don't want it to feel like I'm like searching for the mask, like, all right, this one, okay, hey, here I am, this is the one you wanted, And I felt that a lot in my 20s, like, I mean, I'm still in them. So I'm feeling it now. But definitely in my early 20s, like a lot more where it felt so fragile, where it was almost like if I saw someone from that other world catching me on a date where I'm playing some kind of femme fatale, I'm like, oh shit, I can't let them see me. And they're like, but it's not that different from myself. I just want to feel like I'm embracing all sides of myself and being able to present it as a cohesive, person that I relate to the most and I feel comfortable with, and that my closest friends and family can also connect to people I just meet. And I'm always kind of consistent with that, so I don't feel like I'm just deciding at the moment what it's going to be. And when you're younger, that just seems like everything. It's like, who am I going to present tonight, or like making people happy? Especially with lovers, it was always like, whatever you want to like keep this night going. And it always seemed fun. And then the next day it was kind of like an emotional hangover from it. I was like, who was I last night? I guess we'll find out, because I would film everything. No, I didn't. But yeah, that's really what and I'm working on it every day, a little bit more. Just trying to be like, don't like break into it. Like, it's okay. Just like say how you feel. That's part of you. You'll actually get closer to this person by just being that version of yourself, like the real one. So yeah.
Alia Shawkat, everyone.
Hey.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys later.
See you. see her again at the end of the show. Our next guest, Terri Coleman, I met when we went to New Orleans to do some reporting about the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and we didn't forget her. She's 31 years old. She teaches English at Dillard University. She's also a leader, a coordinator nationally on the National Collegiate Quiz Bowl circuit. In fact, one of her latest tattoos is an homage to the role of trivia in her life. On her left butt cheek, it just says, "Nasty Nerd." Please welcome to the stage, Terri Coleman, along with Bianca Richardson.
There are so many of you. Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like this is a good chance to give a shout out to my tattoo artist, Katie B. If you're ever in New Orleans, she's at Downtown Tattoos on Frenchman. She's awesome. You should go see her. She'll make you real cute. It's inappropriate. So people learn lots of things in their 20s, and I learned a really important lesson in my early 20s. I learned this lesson from someone who is near and dear to my heart. I have an intimate and somewhat fraught relationship with him. A few of you might know him. His name is Jose fucking Cuervo. So this is 2006, 2007. New Orleans is still mostly a ghost town. Like, nobody's had time to come home yet. And there's people around, but none of them are like my people. So like, my parents are in Lafayette. One of my brothers is in Atlanta. One's in Texas. The kids I went to school with, they're in like Chicago, California. Matt's in Brazil. My aunties, uncles, godparents, like everybody's just gone. And it's the first time in my whole life that I haven't had eyes on me, when there's nobody to like snitch. And I lost my goddamn mind. Like, it was the first time in my life that I could just like be my full trash self in public. And so I was my full trash self in public a lot. And I was working at this little like pizza joint in the quarter, and I was living with a lot of the people I worked with, like you do in your 20s. And one night we had gotten off work and we were all like bitching about our customers having some shift drinks, and we decided to turn this into a full-blown after party. So we ended up deciding to go to this bar. But before we left the restaurant, like, I was already fucked up. Like, I was already, like, slurring and, like, messy, and, like, I probably should have walked my little happy ass home, but I didn't, because Trash Terri was nothing if not a survivor, and she soldiered on through this. God, it was trash. We ended up at this little place, Cosimo's. It's like a little, like, hole-in-the-wall joint in the lower quarter. And Olivia, who I live with and works with, she goes up to the bar and she orders us a round of shots. A round of Jose Cuervo. And that was like pretty much the night. I don't remember anything that happened at the bar. Like, we probably had fun. Maybe somebody saw a boob. But like, all I really remember is almost like a movie montage in my head where there's this bar and there's this little plastic shot glass, because it's the kind of place where the shots come in plastic. And there's this clear liquid, and my hand goes to the liquid, and my hand brings the cup and the liquid up to my face hole. And like, I remember this feeling again and again where I closed my eyes and put my head back and like willed my throat to open and like forced myself to swallow again and again and again and again and again and again. And like, gone. So at some point, we ended up at home. I have no idea how we got there. And we had this one roommate, Nettie, who was like super responsible. Like, she had a job that she went to in the morning time, in the AM. And she had her bed on a bed frame, not a mattress on the floor. And like, she's an oncology nurse now in Ireland, where she makes all of the money. And like, I like to think that taking care of garbage me was an integral part of her professional development. So if you're listening, Nettie, you're welcome. Also, thank you very, very much. But I remember her making me drink water and getting me undressed, putting me in bed, kissing my forehead, and then I blacked out. There's nothing left. And then I wake up, puking. And I'm there on my back puking. And that's when I learned the first lesson of this night, which isn't like an epiphany for your whole life to make you a better person, but it is a useful science trivia tidbit if you're interested in those things. If you try to swallow even the tiniest amount of your own vomit, it will magically transform through the magic of science into more vomit. And like, I'm laying there on my back for, like, it had to be hours. Like, my alarm goes off, the radio comes on, like, I know all about the traffic and the weather, and like, Steve Inskeep is talking, we're going all the way through Morning Edition. And I don't even know how it ended. I think my body probably just like shut down again to protect itself from the liability that was my brain at that point in time. And like, I survived. Didn't die of alcohol poisoning, didn't die of shame, cleaned up, got up, went on with life. But I kept on like going back to this night and thinking about it. And that was partially because I didn't successfully swallow my own vomit, and when I was laying there, the vomit was coming like out of my mouth and running down my cheeks onto the mattress, and it had like some staying power in the smell direction. Yeah, it was not cute, not at all. And like, so like that wasn't the only reason I thought about it though, because this night wasn't unique. Like, it was the only night where I tried to swallow my own vomit, but it wasn't the only night where, after a series of unfortunate events, Trash Terri ended up in a situation which was not ideal. And at this point, like, I was starting to get tired of that, and like embarrassed of that, and also really scared of what was happening. And I was like looking back at this night, trying to do an autopsy of it, trying to like figure out like, at what point did I fuck up? Like, why am I making these horrible choices? And like, what I realized as I kept going through this night was that I actually wasn't making bad choices. I mean, clearly I wasn't making good choices, but I wasn't making bad choices. I just wasn't making any choices at all. People had ideas, people wanted to do things, and regardless of whether or not I wanted to, I was just like, I support you in this. How can I help? And like, I didn't know why I did that. And the more I thought about it, the more I tried to go over this night and figure out like, how did we get here? How did we get here? How did we get here? I realized that I'd been doing the same thing since childhood. Like, I had always done this. So when I was in lower school, from kindergarten to 5th grade, I went to this super ritzy, all-girls private Catholic school in New Orleans. And I think it's relevant that I was there as part of an affirmative action quota, like, integration thing. And if you have a school in New Orleans, in the Chocolate City, and that school is less than 2 miles from Magnolia Projects, where Juvenile grew up, and in the 1990s, you are just starting to integrate and have a Negro, and the Negro you get is this kind of like melanin deficient, respectable Negro, then maybe your school isn't actually an educational institution. Like, maybe your school is kind of poison. And like, I don't know, whatever, I was there. So we were, this was 1st or 2nd grade, we're trying to figure out, trying to figure out which American Girl to be. You know that, the book series, the historical fiction / the like line of terrifying dolls? Those. And all the little white girls, they're like, I don't know who I'll choose. Like, maybe I'll be Felicity because I love George Washington. Bitch don't know about Oni Judge, though. That was a deep cut Black history joke. You're welcome. And like, you know, maybe I'll be Samantha because I love velvet dresses and writing. And it became really clear really early on that I wasn't gonna have a choice. And I feel kind of fucked up about it now because I think these little white girls knew before I knew. Because at that point in my mind, I was still stupid enough to think I was a full-ass person. I was a whole person. I was just Terri. But to them, I was token Terri. There's only one Black American girl. There's Addie. And so I didn't have a choice because Addie is the token and Terri is the token and there are no other options. But I really didn't want to be Addie. I was just like the rest of them. I had read all of the books. Like, I liked Kirsten, I like braids, I like Scandinavia. Like, I also participated in these stories. But Like, I'm in my 30s now. It's been 20 years since I've read the Addie book, and I still remember that book. I still remember what it felt like reading it. In the book, Addie's dad and her brother get sold away. And the next day, she still has to go work in the fields, because when you're a slave, you don't get, like, bereavement time. And she's distracted, understandably, and she's going down the row, and she's picking the tobacco grubs off the leaves. But she only gets the top, because she's distracted. She leaves all the bugs underneath. And the overseer sees this, and he comes up the row behind her, and he collects all of these grubs. At the end of the row, he stops her, and he makes her eat them. Connie Porter, who wrote this book, she takes an extra sentence to point out that the overseer doesn't let Addie just swallow them. He makes her chew. And when I was reading that book, I remember feeling these grubs in my mouth. I remember feeling them squirm. And so they're back in the classroom. These little girls, they weren't monsters. They didn't know what they were doing. They weren't doing anything on purpose to me. But what it felt like was that they were saying, Terri, the only choice you have is to eat the worms again. And I couldn't do it. The only choice I had was one I could not make. I was 8 or 9, I didn't have like the capacity or the language to explain what was happening, to ask for help, and I don't think Miss Kapanica would have listened anyway, because she was kind of horrible. But all I did instead was, I knew that I could make one choice. I could make some white girls cry and maybe pop them in their mouth. And I made the appropriate choice, and I got in trouble. I should have gotten in trouble. I hurt someone, and I chose for myself, I centered myself, I hurt someone, and I exploded, and I got in trouble. And that's what I learned again and again and again throughout my childhood, that if I chose for myself, if I chose what I wanted and what I needed, if I chose not to eat the fucking worms, I was a problem, and I got in trouble. I learned never to choose for me. So when you fast forward to your early 20s, when there's no one around to like curate your experiences, if you don't choose good things for yourself, you end up laying on your back trying to swallow your own vomit. Yeah, it's not good, not at all. And like, this realization that like, oh, fuck, Terri, you're not making bad choices, you're not making choices. You are a person who can make choices. It was like life-shattering. It changed everything. And it wasn't immediate, it wasn't like, I tried to swallow my own puke, and then I got a CPA and made good choices. Like, Bianca's on point. It just, like, it took a minute. I had to practice. And, like, it was solidly, like, post-Cuervo catastrophe that I was trying to choose which birth control to use, and I took too long, and I went through a whole-ass pregnancy and have a whole-ass, like, living, breathing child because of this. But I got better at it. I learned how to look at my options and make decisions based on what doors I wanted to leave open for myself, what sacrifices I was willing to make, what doors I was willing to close. And so in 2011, when I found out I was pregnant again, I was still in school, I was like, well, I can look at my choices this time. I don't want to give up school. I don't want to give up the life that I want to make for myself and for my family. And so I had an abortion and got rid of it. Then, after I finished undergrad, I moved my entire family across the country to Charleston, Illinois, the land of corn, casserole, sadness. And about 2 months after we got there, I realized my Nuva ring had punked me, and I was pregnant again. That time, I did the same thing. I looked at my choices, the options I had, what doors I was willing to close, and what doors I wanted to leave open, and I decided to keep it. I have 3 kids now, and every day, like, raising children is not like a fun thing. Like, I spend a lot of time like breaking up fights about things I do not care about and like wiping other human beings' butts. But when I'm doing that, this recognition that I chose them, that I decided to give up things in order to have things, and they are one of the things, the experiences, the pieces of my life that I wanted, it lets me be happy. I think a lot of times when people have stories like mine, they're really easy to TLDR into this neat little box where, you know, it's like, there go I, but for the grace of God, you know, this story of like redemption. But for me, it's really not at all one of those neat little stories, and God does not have a lot to do with it. Instead, it's weird to say out loud, but when I think about it, if not for the grace of our Lord and Savior and the patron saint of fuckboys, Jose Cuervo, I wouldn't be here at all.
That's Terri Coleman. Terri Coleman and LA's own Bianca Richardson. Thanks to you all. We're gonna have some tequila shots in the back. Our next guest is one of my very favorite actors working today. I mean, when you look at her work, you have seen her do slapstick comedy on Reno 911. You have seen her play the nurse whose patience is being tried on Getting On. And now on Claws, she is the scheming yet maternal nail salon owner in Florida. And the thing about every role that she plays, no matter what crazy thing they are doing, you see the heart and humanity at her character's core. Please welcome Niecy Nash. Hi, Niecy.
Hi, everybody. Doing my best to keep these thighs in, okay.
So, Niecy, we are talking about our 20s on the show tonight. You have some kids in their 20s now. 2 of your 3 kids are in their 20s.
You just gonna start right there, huh? All right, let's go for it. I'm in.
Let's do it.
What do you want to know?
Let's do it. I want to know how, you look at their lives now and how you think about what was happening in your life in your early 20s. What's different for them?
When I look at my children, I think that they have it easy. Very easy, because when I was in my 20s, I was already married with children. So the fact that you can, listen, if they were any more dependent on me, we'd all have the same Social Security number. Okay? So when I was in my 20s, I was on my own with a husband, with babies, trying to figure it out. So we have it's very, very different. Yeah, and my kids are all single. None of them have children, and everything they have is tied to my credit. So it's real different. I was good and grown when I was in my 20s.
Well, let's talk about that. So you're 22 when you have your first child?
21.
21. And you were studying theater. You want to be an actor at that point.
Yes, when I'm 5 years old, I see the most gorgeous black woman I had ever seen in my little 5 years of living. She came on television in a long red dress, and her eyelashes looked like butterflies. And I had seen black people on TV before, but they never looked like that. And I said, Grandmama, who is that? She was smoking a cigarette on a long filter, honey. Now that's what you did back in the day. Cigarette was out to here. And she said, baby, that's Lola Falana. And I said, oh, Grandma, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be black and fabulous and on TV.
Here and you are. Take a minute.
She said, and well, you are.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm 20, and yes. And what were you?
So the question is, so when you get pregnant and you have these big ambitions.
Oh,
Did you think you were going to have to choose, or how did it work when all of a sudden you have an infant and you also know you want to start a career in Hollywood? How did you think about it at that time?
Well, my plan A was to be an actor. My plan B was to make that plan A work. So there were 3 words that I began to live by: no matter what. So my no matter what of it all meant push through whatever the obstacle or whatever it is you have to face, you make it happen no matter what. I used to have like horrible arguments with my ex-husband, and always before an audition. And I entered into the business being funny. So I would cry all the way, from where I was living in the ghetto, up here to one of these fancy studios, the whole way.
Yeah.
I would get there, I would clean that makeup up, pat that thing down, push them shoulders back, and sashay on in there. Or if I got a call back at 4 o'clock and all the kids got out at 3, what did I have to do? Pack them all up, take them to the casting office, put them in the corner, get the baba. Where's the baba? Find the baba. You get a coloring book. Sit down. Where's the graham crackers? You understand what I'm saying? And make the corner of the casting office into a preschool.
Yeah.
No matter what.
That's amazing. I love that.
Thank you.
When did you feel like you were making enough money?
When did I feel like I was making enough to do what?
Enough to not feel like on edge.
To not feel on edge.
Or question whether no matter what was the right attitude.
Well, no matter what is always the right attitude. Rest assured on that part. Well, it's hard. Okay, when I booked my first full-time job, it was my home makeover show called Clean House. And then,
Which you won an Emmy for.
Some clean housewives, hey y'all. Who wants a clean house? Okay. So I booked Clean House, Reno 911, and then a recurring role on Bernie Mac as his sister. Rest in peace to the Mac man. All within about 2 weeks. Like it came, boom, 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 boom. Before that, standing in a lot of lines and trying to figure it all out. But I've always tried to live within my means. You know what I mean? So that if you're not overspending based on what you have, then you shouldn't have a time where you have to question it. It's when you get loose. You know what I mean? Or your debt starts to overtake you that it becomes another thing. So I try to always manage it. It takes two to manage it when you're married. I'm just gonna slide that in. So there were some other challenges, but we can move on.
Something that also happened in your 20s is you lost your brother to gun violence. Someone brought a gun to school and he was shot and killed at school. He was a teenager.
Yeah, 17.
And you were a new mother. You're trying to start an acting career. How did you fit, or have you fit in mourning your brother when so much is happening in your life and you're already responsible to other people?
Well, see, there used to be a time in my life where, because there were so many tragedies, prior to my brother being killed, I saw my mother get shot by her boyfriend. As close to me as I am to you. And she survived that, but it was very traumatic. It was a very traumatic event.
Yeah.
And so and harrying up and trying to marry a man thinking he was gonna fix it all. I wanted him on the white horse and to ride in and to make it all better. And I went from the frying pan to the fire in that situation. And so what I started to do was I just decided to not feel. I'm like, that's got to be easier than this nonsense. So I was like, I'm just not going to feel that. And so everything was a joke, and everything was fun and funny. And he would come home and be like, hey, we need to talk. And my response would be, we need to talk. We need to talk. Hey, we need to talk. Hey, and he's like, oh my God, will you knock it off already? And then I wasn't managing my emotions well. And then at one point, I just got sick of myself.
When?
Well, it had gone on for a while of the not managing.
Yeah.
Not managing the emotions well was like just a dark cloud over me. You know what I mean? Because to wear the mask of everything is good and, the tears of a clown. You know what I mean? You just jumping around all day. It's exhausting running from yourself, and I just had to say enough is enough. and it's time to do something different because I've mastered this. And I know where this leads. And then I decided to do something else. But the one thing that I will tell you is that the adage is true, is that out of your mess, there's this beautiful message, there's this epiphany, there's this other thing that happens on the other side of it. And I remember when my brother was shot, I took a backstage to my grief because my mother, it's out of order to lose a child. So I'm looking at my mother going, my God. What do we do here? And the only thing I knew was that I could make my mama laugh, right? And I never wanted to be a comedian because I always got in trouble for making people laugh. I got pinched in church. I got put on punishment because I had talks too much on my report card. My mama said, well, what was you in there talking about? I said, I was telling jokes. I got a joke for you. Go get the belt. I'm like, okay. So it was never a good thing. It was always, my God, that girl is so silly. She's the silliest child God has blown breath into. Sit down, stop it, girl. So I didn't know being funny was a thing. So when after my mother had been shot, gone through a terrible divorce, then my brother was killed, she said, I'm getting into bed and I'm never getting back out. And I said, well, what do I do? So in my 20s, I stood at the front of my mother's bed every day and told her jokes, stories, did my bid, tap danced, hula hooped. There was a myriad of skills that I developed at the foot of my mother's bed. So one day I go in there and she's not in the bed. And I'm like, where's my mother? We're in here. I'm like, who's we? I went across the street and got the neighbors, Miss Brown and Miss Sadie. I told them you was funny. Get that karaoke microphone and tell these people some jokes. So I'm telling the people the jokes, and I realized because I wanted to just do drama. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted them to do a remake, of Roots Part 6 or 7, and I get to be the lead slave. You know what I mean? I was preparing for that in my mind, and then that did not happen. And I was standing up there telling my mother and her neighbors these jokes, and I heard a voice as audible as my own say, Niecy, don't be a selfish heifer. It's other people. Now that's what the voice said to me. Don't judge my voice. Don't judge my internal voice, okay? My voice said to me, don't be a selfish heifer. It's other people suffering. Go outside and spread it around. So I went outside because I couldn't book a job anywhere in this town. I went outside and said, I'm Niecy Nash and I'm funny. And they said, yes, you are, little girl. Come here. And that's what came on the other side of all of that.
So about how old were you when you had that feeling of only making people laugh, running from your feelings, performing, when that ran out?
When I stopped feeling like that?
Yeah.
That was probably in my late 20s, knocking on the door at 30, when I was like, oh my goodness, I got to do something different.
And how did you learn how to do something different?
You know what? I spent a lot of time in church, and it was there that my prayer life became so rich. And it's hard to stand in a place of being available to be used and have so much overtaking you. And that was always my thing. I've never been on the set and not gotten somebody else a job. I just feel like, well, who does that? I mean, I don't know. I guess people do it, but I don't. Because I don't feel like when I get anything that is just for me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm so grateful that I get to live my dream because there are so many people who do not, that when I stand flat-footed in a blessing that was customized for me, my first question is, how can I be used? Thank you. We got 2 or 3 that want to be used. But that's okay. The people that didn't clap, they selfish. They selfish. They for self. No, I'm just kidding. But so anyway, because I really want to serve in the gift, you have to be a prepared place for that.
Did you have someone in the business who you went to for advice?
No, well, not really. What happened was, true story, I went to this audition, and this was back in the day when you used to walk in with a full 8x10, and then you had your resume stapled to the back. And my resume had maybe 6 things on it, but they were all very foolish. Miss South Bay, second winner-up grand talent. That was right at the top. Lead usher at the Tabernacle of Faith Bible Fellowship play. And there was a guy who is now a very big deal over at Lifetime, but then he was a casting assistant. My good friend, Jason Wood, he's still my friend, but I didn't know him from a can of paint. And he was receiving the pictures, and he looked at the back of mine and he just said, "Girlfriend, psst, come here. This is all wrong, dear." And he just started to go through it with a red pen. And when he got through, there was only one thing left. And I said, "Dang, you scratched all my stuff out. Now I only got one thing on there." He looked back and said, "But darling, it's the right thing." And I said, "Well, excuse me." And I loved him in that moment. And I still love him now. So he was the one that I would go to and be like, "Hey, here's the situation. What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" And he's still my really dear friend. But I didn't know anybody in entertainment. I'm from South Central, and I had never heard of Groundlings, Second City. I didn't know what improv was when I auditioned for Reno. I lied my way into that Reno audition. Facts. Hashtag facts. They were auditioning, and they called and said, originally, "Can you do sketch?" And I said, "Yes." And I hung up the phone and I called my friend Big George and said, "What the hell is sketch?" I didn't even know what it was. And he was like, "Oh, you got to do characters and stuff." And I was like, "Okay, I could do that." But when I got there were 2 girls there who I now know were huge in the improv world. But at the time, I didn't know, so I'm not going to name names. So one of them was doing vocal warm-ups. Mama, pop, all this stuff. And I was like, "Ooh." And then the other girl was on the other side stretching for the gods, leg here, bow. I was sitting down reading a magazine. I stood up, I was like, "I could give you a good lunch. Is this anything?" But the one thing that I feel like worked for me in this business is that I was always comfortable in my skin, always. And I remember knocking on the door, and there were maybe 15 people in there, and I said, "Excuse me, are y'all about to get this dog and pony show started?" Now, I don't have nothing on my resume. These people don't know me from a can of paint. I don't even know how I got in there, right? And then one person in the room said, "Well, why? Are you in a hurry?" And I said, "Ma'am, as a matter of fact, I am. I got to get my kids to Chuck E. Cheese by 7 o'clock. Because the last time I was late, they jumped on the mouse, the head came off, the man ran in the back and never came back out. So yeah, I'm in a hurry." So they let me audition. So I do the audition, I don't know no better, and that's it, and I leave. They say, they want to give you a call back. And I'm like, "Say what?" So I have my mother watching my kids, so I'm not distracted. But I don't even know enough. This is one thing about being young. You don't know what you don't know, so you don't have fear. Fear is learned. Yeah. You learn how to be fearful when you're older, like, "Oh my God, are they maybe I shouldn't, but if I go and I don't know what they're going." I didn't know any better. Matter of fact, when I went back to the callback, first thing they said when I walked in, I was like, "Hello, everyone, I'm ready," and got myself together. "What happened at Chuck E. Cheese?" I'm like, "Girl, it was a good time." So cut two, I ended up, this is what I'm telling you about learn fear. I didn't know what I didn't know, so I didn't know to be afraid of it. I said, "I could do the same thing I did last time, but I found a handkerchief in the back of my car when I was on my way over here. And just while I was driving, I made up this skit called Carol the Slave. Y'all want to see that? How do you go into one of the biggest auditions of your life and not test out the material? You ain't ran it past your mama. You haven't let your friends hear nothing. I was like, I made up a thing in the car.
On the way over.
Right.
Well, in the spirit of passing it on,
Yeah.
we're going to give some advice to Death,
Oh,
Sex,
are we?
and Money listeners.
Advice.
So you
okay.
stay put. I'm going to invite back Alia, Shawkat, and Terri Coleman. Please come out on stage. Okay, Niecy's already dropped some serious knowledge, so.
Oh yeah, I've learned a lot.
So we're well into the advice segment. So we asked our listeners, our Death, Sex, and Money listeners, in their 20s, if they had life questions about starting out adulthood. And we got a lot of questions. Here's just a sampling.
Does hard work really pay off?
Is this what work-life balance means?
How do you make a long-distance family relationship work for everyone?
Can the girl propose to the guy, or is that still kind of weird?
How do I decorate my home like an adult?
Does it get any easier?
Is it normal to feel this way?
Any advice, tips, anything. I need it.
She needs it. So let's start with our first question. This is a video.
Hi, I'm Samaya. I'm 22 years old and I live in New York City. And I was wondering how to deal with friends who make a lot more money than you and have a different relationship to money. I definitely have a lot of friends who ask me to go out on these expensive things and, don't get that. One, it's my whole weekend budget. And two, it's like pretty uncomfortable to keep feeling like I have to spend a lot of money to hang out with people. And it kind of feels like they're flashing their money around and I don't know how to talk to them about that.
Okay, Alia, I'm throwing this one to you first.
Yeah.
How do you deal with money differentials in friendships?
Yeah, I definitely went through that. I had a lot of friends who were like some other actors, and money was like no question to them. And we'd be in these crowds, and I was like, yeah, me too, splits. And it was very uncomfortable. The advice I would give is like, suggest your own night out, and don't be like embarrassed about being like, dude, that's too expensive. I don't have the money. I don't want to go there. But you know what? There is this really cool spot that I discovered, and it's like really good, and it's actually cheap. And then there's a cool bar around the corner that has, something that fits in yours. Because I think every friendship, it shouldn't depend on how much money you make. Otherwise, cut those friends out as soon as possible. But also, just like there should be a balance of what you guys do together. So it should be a mix of both, and just suggest other things. And I don't think there's any shame in being like, I can't afford that right now, but this is fun, so let's do this instead.
Terri, Niecy, anything to add?
Yeah, so as the not famous person, like she said this in the past tense, like, oh, I remember that. Bitch, that's my life. I still have that part. And so I do very much agree with that. Like, it's really important to like not have shame in that. But so like I also I grew up always going to school with rich kids. Like I was one of the only kids at my school whose mom worked. And I kind of have leaned in to being the one without money and just being like, look, oh wait, your parents have a pool in the front yard? All right, where do you want to take me? Like, I think owning that, I think it's good for people who do not have to recognize that like it's not because we fucked up, right? Like, we're still fine. And I think it's important for us to do a service for our wealthier peers and let them know that, like, maybe you should come down to earth and pull this tab. Like,
For sure.
I would just say, get some broke friends. I mean, because that's really your tribe right now. And as you elevate, then the friends, and when you get more money, those friends will have more money. But it's like, she's friending up. Friend down a little bit.
I feel like too, you can like monetize that. Like, don't we love like the authentic and like the peasant street food? Be like, let me take you to this great place. It's called my auntie's house. How about you pay for groceries? Like, we can own this.
Okay, let's go to the next question.
I'm Mia. I'm 25 and in Baltimore, and I just moved to this city a few months ago to start my career. So I'm starting new in this city, and I'm wondering, how do you make friends as an adult and find community, and why is it so hard? It's a lot harder than it was when I was in school, and I'm honestly feeling like a lost failure. So, thank you.
Oh, Mia.
She's so cute. I'll be your friend.
Niecy, what's your advice for Mia? How do you build a community when you move to a new place?
Well, I would say go places that you like. It's always going to be somebody there, and don't be afraid to meet people. And a lot of times, it starts where you spend the most time. That's where you're going to find the most people, the places that you spend the most time, whether that's your work, your church, your school, your this, your that. But in a closed mouth won't get fed. You can, even if you're at the gym or wherever, talk to people. And you'll be surprised, the ones that don't talk back, because you know why? We attract a measure of what we are at any given moment. So the people who are right in lockstep with your energy will respond in kind.
Is that getting harder with texting, with digital culture? Is it getting harder to talk?
Shut up. My son, look here. My son, I watched him on the phone. I was on the computer working. He text messaged back and forth with the same girl for an hour and a half. And I said, son, pick up the phone and call the girl. He said, call her? Don't nobody talk on the phone no more? I'm like, what is going on?
It's so true. I could find out I'm not into somebody just through their text conversation. At first I'm like, this is going well. And then one weird emoji, I'm like, no, I'm never talking to him again. It's like, it just open and shut. I know, it's not healthy. But I do find I remember being in, especially at work, sometimes I end up being in a weird city by myself for 2 months, and I'll go out, look at cool places or bars or shows, and, just sitting there because I don't have anyone texting me, except my mother most of the time. And I'm looking around okay, and everyone is kind of like this. I'm doing the motion looking down at my hand as if I'm on my phone. So it's everyone's kind of lost in a world, and it is a little harder to just make eye contact or smile at somebody, but it does take just starting a silly conversation. Something happens and you just comment on it and make it seem like your friend's in the bathroom, so you're not a weirdo. You're like, yeah, she's coming, just hanging out.
Our next question is a recording, an audio recording, and it's from a listener who asked to be called Rebecca. She didn't want to use a real name. It's about sex.
I'm a 20-something, and the life advice question that I have is about sex. I'm wondering how to enjoy it. I think at this time in my life, it's awkward and it's weird, and my partner and I, we've been together for coming up on 3 years, but we both have really limited understandings of what we want and what we like and what we don't like. I don't know. I'd love other people's input, and I hope to get some answers. Bye.
Let me just start this off and say, Rebecca, you ain't been in the world long enough to know what you want and what you like. It don't get good till you get grown. You gotta learn your body. So right now, this is just practice. We just hanging out. We just trying to.
We're talking about practice.
We talking about practice. In my Allen Iverson voice, that is exactly what we talking about. Practice, because it's not until you understand what you want in your body that you can articulate it to somebody else. You looking at this little boy who ain't been around the block 2-3 times, and you trying to think he's gonna pleasure you in a way, and he know what he doing. He don't. He don't. And once you get older, don't hold nothing against a man who done had a lot of partners. He needed to get all that practice so he could serve you well. So she just needs to take her time a little bit and not rush herself in it. You know what I mean? Not rush herself in it, because it does get greater later.
Ooh, that was good.
The tagline, so good.
Okay, how about, but give me a sentence, someone, for in the moment. What's the thing to say when you're trying to figure out how to make yourself feel good? What's the thing to say to your partner?
While it's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like from experience, it goes either way. because sometimes you're like, you know what, I'm just going to tell them exactly what I want to do this. And sometimes you do like a certain voice to keep it in the mode. And then sometimes I'll just be like, stop, I'm like, let's turn the lights on and look at each other for a second. And we might not finish this tonight, but I still feel like I have to tell you what I've been feeling lately and what I want to do, even though I've never done it, so I don't know what it's going to feel like. But it's so true what Niecy was saying. It's like, I think there's something about expectations, especially when you're younger, that certain relationships, and especially sexual ones I had when I was younger, were so much expectation. It was like comparing it to the first time I had amazing sex with someone that I was in love with, and it was like so early on, and like we kissed in the rain, and I'm like, that happened once, and then I'm following it for another 10 years, like trying to get that back. It's like, no. We can't have too many expectations, and I think it's also something for women that we're taught more, that it's not just like, not that sex should necessarily be casual, but that it is an experience to learn from. And so next time you know this, and next time you set certain boundaries, or next time you ask for more, and instead of feeling like you're just supposed to get it. And I feel a lot of the time women just feel like, yeah, the partner is just supposed to do it, and we just kind of like slowly wave back and forth our bodies and hope it works out. It's like, no, you got to really, figure out what you want to say, but that takes having some mistakes and being attracted to maybe someone you weren't at first attracted to, and kind of figuring that on your own.
And also, too, you can't, listen, it's like rolling the dice, especially if it's a hookup. And you don't know that person, and they don't know you. So it's real, it's the random part of it. Anything could happen or not happen. But when you're in a relationship with somebody, the best time to talk about it is when you're not doing it.
Yeah.
Huh? Tell mama what you like. Oh, okay. That's when so that by the time you get there, we already got the roadmap laid out, and everybody knows their part.
Well, I think too, for like, especially for young 20-somethings and for people who are raised as girl children, we are often, we forget how the sexual economy works. So I don't know, for me, like it was always like, oh, like dude wants to bone me, thank you? Like it didn't ever come into like, maybe I might want something. It was just like this relief that I was desirable, that someone who could want me. But like, I'm gonna move my bangs so y'all can see how they did my makeup. Like, I'm real pretty. Like, thank you, Koa, backstage. But like, and like, it's not like, anyone who wants to fuck you has already said that like you are worth something. They want you, and they are willing to work for you. So you do have the right to say like, this is the work I want you to put in. And if you don't know what that work is yet, then you have the right to say like, actually, this isn't going well. Like, can I try a different dish on the menu? Like, we have that agency because anybody who wants to fuck you already likes you. You don't have to impress them.
Thank you.
I should have asked
Let's go to
if we
another
could say
question.
fuck. Sorry.
Hi, Anna. My name is Caroline. I'm a 23-year-old living in Boston. My question is how to handle professional rejection. Like, as you move further along in your career, what happens if you don't get the promotion you want, and what do you do going forward? Thanks.
Yeah, how do you deal with rejection when you're trying to have the attitude of no matter what, and doors are slammed?
Well, honestly, when you're moving forward in the thing that whatever your chosen path is, it is important to know the difference between a call on your life and a hobby. So if I'm just doing this just to do it, I'm working retail just to have something to do, it's very different than I'm starting a clothing line. I want to be a retailer. It's a very different thing. So when you are living your life on purpose and people don't get it and they don't lean in, I honestly felt sorry for them. I felt sorry for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Because I'm like, I am all that. Y'all are about to miss it. You about to miss it. Yeah. And I was like, and I hate to do that, but I just kind of like how I feel, like when they're like, we're gonna go another way, but thanks. And I would just literally look at them and go, oh, honey. Okay. All right. Y'all sure? Going once. So So, because I was so sure. And I think that if you're sure, you have to hold on to that and don't let your faith waver in yourself. That's why it's not called them esteem and us esteem and mama esteem. Self-esteem.
Yeah. I'm sometimes jealous a little bit of the youths in this generation because the upside to our economies falling apart and the world ending is that there's a lot of like freedom and liberation inside there. And like, so this is a Women in Podcasting conference, right?
Yeah.
Podcasts are a brand new thing. This is something that exists only because the magical doors that existed that were so closely guarded, motherfuckers missed a lot of opportunities. And I think it's really important for everyone, but especially for young people coming into these types of economies that we exist in now, to recognize that like, just because they have all the money, just because they have all the structures, does not mean they make good decisions, does not mean they actually know better, and maybe you don't get the promotion, maybe you don't get the thing, but like we can make our own platforms, we can make our own paths, and if you do what you do well, if you devote yourself to what you enjoy, like if you build it, they will come. And they will be sad because they missed you. You don't have to cry over them. I mean, you gotta pay bills, but
Yeah,
you can
you gotta
still
pay
keep
bills.
like your confidence.
And Alia, how did you, like, when you were figuring out what kind of actor you wanted to be as an adult, like, what was that phase like in figuring out how to deal with rejection and which roles to really push for?
Well, it's funny, something that Niecy said earlier, like how you learn fear. When I was younger, as a kid actor, if I didn't get a part, my mom was much more upset about it than I was. She would be like, oh, you didn't get it. And I'd be like, oh, okay. So we're still going home and having pasta for dinner, right? Like, it really didn't bother me. It never came into my mind. I was like, all right, I'm just not right for that one. And I didn't even overthink it. And then weirdly, when I became, I was like 18 in my early 20s, that's when I started to be like, well, maybe it's because I'm not good enough. And I don't look like that actress, and I'm not this, and I don't know what I am, and then I started feeling bitter, like, well, I don't want to, be a part of that club anyways. And it took me more recently where, even now, it's still rejection all the time in this industry. So it's like, there's something I really imagine, and I go, you know what, I want this, and I really am going to put my focus on it. If I really want it, then it'll happen. And then I'll work really hard on it, and then I won't get it. And it'll be hurtful at first. I'll be like, darn, I really kind of imagine that, and then it doesn't take long to all of a sudden realize, obviously I didn't really want it in the right way, and also that it opens up so many more opportunities. And it's kind of like you pick it up, and it doesn't work, and you put it down, and you keep your hand open for something else, because something else will always come in, and like, whether it sounds cheesy or not, I really believe in the like meant to be, and especially with this kind of work, but any kind of thing, you look back. If you follow your instincts and really keep your mind open to something else that you're like, oh, thank God I didn't get that thing, because then this wouldn't have been able to happen. And it's always more specific and more unexpected that what you actually wanted. And it can disguise itself a lot, especially when you're young, where you're like, I really want this, like this will define me, this will make it. And you're like, maybe you're actually pretending you want this, you're projecting on it. And it's about how you get there always anyway. So it's like, just be open to something else because it's 110% around the corner.
I like opening hand. I like that visual.
Thanks.
We have one last question from a listener.
Hi everybody, my name is Jasmine and I'm 26. And my question is, as someone in their mid-20s who's used to getting really good grades, and using that to measure growth, I'm having a hard time feeling accomplished for things that don't typically come with sort of a pat on the back. It would be helpful to get some ideas on how to measure growth or how you did when you were my age. Niecy, I love you. Bye.
I love you too.
I think this is something I really struggled with when I was all of a sudden out of school, is when you're used to getting kind of assignments, finishing assignments, getting told whether you did a good enough job, and feeling like you're kind of on a track of growth. When that falls away in your 20s, if you felt like you had that, like how do you tell if you're whether keeping up, doing enough, growing enough?
You looking at me?
Well, whoever has an idea.
Well, the one thing I will say is it always helps when you are honest with yourself. When you're honest with yourself, you know when you've done enough. You know when you've done your best. You know when you could have done more. You know when you cheated yourself instead of treated yourself. So I say be honest with yourself. And if there's any place in your life that doesn't feel full for you, leaning into that direction. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, work, boom, check. But socially, I feel like, I'm missing something. Or in my intimate relationship, it's just, you know what I mean? So that you can have a little bit in all your cups. The goal is to live full. You know what I mean? And then what happens is when you're getting the grades in school, that's somebody else judging you. You understand what I'm saying? You don't get to read your own paper and be like, yep, I'm gonna write A on this. Right? So when you come out from underneath that, you're judging you. Now you're responsible for yourself and what you put into the world. You know when you go home and you did something and you like, you know what, I shouldn't have did that. I feel kind of guilty about that. That's you judging yourself, getting yourself in check. And I think that's where she has to rest.
Definitely. And it's a hard thing to have to reappropriate that. But I also think something that's been helpful to me is a sense of competition, healthy competition, and not being threatened by other people, whether it's another woman, whether it's a man, whoever it is, and having it inspire you. And being like, you know what, I like the way they handled that situation, or I like the way they did that, and be like, that's gonna get me going. Because sometimes you can't find it in yourself, and you have to see another representation of it. And don't feel threatened by it, well, look, they're doing their whole thing, and I can't get it together. And I find that that's it's a new thing where I'm like, yeah, I feel competitive with this person, but it excites me, because I think they're really awesome. And so I have to do that in my own way. And I think that helps me a lot.
Using jealousy as a guide. That's one of my tricks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally. I think I end up taking it to bring it super literal. As a former overachieving student, I was the kind of kid if I wasn't gonna be the first one to finish my test and make everybody else nervous, somebody else went before me, I would hold on to my paper till the end of class because I didn't want anyone else to know that I wasn't the best. I was not okay. And I see that in some of my students now where they just they need to know, they need this validation. And if you're still in school, rubrics are a beautiful thing and your instructors are supposed to have them. You can ask them what the metrics are for grading. And so even if you get a bad grade, you can understand the grade and do better. But you can also do that for yourself in your world. So if there's something you care about that you want to have that validation for, lay out a rubric for yourself, what you think success would look like. Do that before you go to do the thing. And then after you do it, regardless of what, maybe response to it might be part of your rubric that you've made for yourself. Oh my God, I sound so pedagogical right now. Maybe that'll be part of your rubric, but you will have also laid out the things that success could look like when you define it for yourself. And so maybe you only got a 30% on return from other people. But if you know that you tried your ass off and you got better at writing copy for doing some kind of promo thing, if you can see that, then you can move yourself towards not being so dependent on the fickle garbage people of the world. Most people are trash.
So we all have our assignment of going home and making our diagrams from Terri Coleman to figure out our own rubrics for success. But I want to thank you so much for being here. Terri, Alia, Shawkat, Niecy Nash, thank you so much. And all of you, thank you so much for being here. This is Death, Sex, and Money from WNYC. I'm Anna Sale. Good night.